The forest swallowed us whole, its silence louder than our footsteps crunching on pine needles. I could still hear Riley's laugh, sharp, reckless, like she was daring the world to catch yupicoing in my head as we hiked deeper into the Oregon wilderness. By the time we realized the trail markers had vanished, the sky was bruising purple, and my best friend's hand brushing mine felt like a spark in the dark. We were supposed to be escaping the suffocating expectations of our small town, the whispers that followed us like shadows, the weight of being 22 and still figuring out who we were. Riley had planned this weekend camping trip with her usual chaotic energy, tossing a map and a half-packed backpack into my old Jeep, promising we'd find something real out here. Just us, Nora, she'd said, her green eyes glinting with that wild edge I'd always loved. No rules, no judgment. I believed her. I always did. But now, lost in the woods with no cell service and a dying flashlight, I wasn't so sure. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and cedar, and the cold was creeping into my bones. Riley, a step ahead, turned back to me, her short brown hair sticking to her forehead from the mist. "We're fine," she said, but her voice wavered, betraying the bravado she wore like armor. I wanted to believe her, but the way her gaze lingered on me too long, too heavy, made my stomach twist in a way I couldn't name. We'd been best friends since 8th grade, when she moved to our sleepy town of Willow Creek and sat next to me in history class, doodling stars on my notebook. Riley was firebolt, unapologetic, the kind of person who could make you feel alive just by standing next to her. I was the quiet one, the planner, the one who kept us out of trouble when her ideas got too big. Everyone in town paired us like salt and pepper, inseparable but different. They didn't see the way my heart raced when she slung an arm around me, or how I memorized the curve of her smile when she thought no one was watching. "We need to find shelter," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. The temperature was dropping fast, and our thin jackets weren't enough. Riley nodded, scanning the trees like she could will a cabin into existence. We trudged on, the forest growing darker, the sounds of unseen creatures rustling in the underbrush. My mind kept circling back to her touch earlier, her fingers grazing mine as she handed me the water bottle, the way her eyes softened before she looked away. It wasn't the first time I'd felt that spark, but I'd always buried it. She was Riley, my best friend. Nothing more. We stumbled upon a clearing just as the last light faded. A small, rocky overhang jutted out from a low cliff, barely enough to shield us from the drizzle starting to fall. "This'll do," Riley said, dropping her backpack with a thud. She started gathering sticks, her movements quick and purposeful, like she could outrun the tension building between us. I helped, my hands shaking not from the cold, but from the way her silhouette moved against the fading sky, all sharp angles and quiet strength. We built a fire, small and sputtering, but enough to warm our hands. Sitting side by side on a log, our knees almost touching, the silence felt heavier than the forest around us. "You scared?" Riley asked, her voice low, like she was testing me. I shook my head, but my eyes betrayed me, darting to her lips before I could stop myself. She noticed. Of course she did. Riley always noticed everything. "Nora," she said, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my cheek. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she could hear it. "What if we didn't go back?" Her words hung between us, reckless and impossible, like a match held too close to kindling. I didn't know what she meant, not really, but the way her eyes locked onto mine told me she wasn't talking about the woods. I pulled back, my throat tight. "We can't just stay lost," I said, my voice barely audible. But Riley wasn't listening. She reached for my hand, her fingers curling around mine, warm and sure. The world tilted, and for a moment, it was just us two girls in the middle of nowhere, caught in something bigger than either of us could name. The fire crackled, spitting embers into the night. I wanted to pull away, to laugh it off like I always did when things got too close. But her grip tightened, and the look in her eyes wasn't playful anymore. It was raw, unguarded, like she'd been carrying something heavy for years and was finally letting it spill. "Riley, what are you doing?" I whispered, my voice breaking. She didn't answer. Instead, she leaned in, her lips brushing mine soft, hesitant, then urgent. My mind screamed to stop, to think, but my body betrayed me, leaning into her, tasting the salt of her skin and the smoke from the fire. It was everything I'd never let myself want, everything I'd buried under years of friendship and fear. When we pulled apart, gasping, the world felt different. The forest was still there, dark and endless, but now it held a secret that could change everything. Riley's eyes searched mine, waiting for me to say something, anything. But all I could think was, she crossed the line. And I let her. The kiss lingered in the air like the smoke from our dying fire, curling around us, impossible to ignore. My lips still burned, and Riley's eyes wide, searching, almost afraid, held mine like she was waiting for me to run. I didn't, but God, I wanted to, because staying meant facing what that kiss had cracked open inside me. We sat in silence, the forest pressing in, its whispers louder now in the dark. I pulled my knees to my chest, trying to anchor myself, but my mind was a storm. Riley had always been the reckless one, the one who jumped without looking. But this was a cliff neither of us had seen coming. Or maybe I had. In the quiet moments I'd never admitted to myself, when her laugh made my chest ache. Or when I caught myself staring too long at the way her hands moved when she talked. "Nora," she said finally, her voice rough, like she was fighting to keep it steady. "Say something." Her fingers twitched, like she wanted to reach for me again but didn't dare. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. What could I say? That I was terrified. That I'd spent years convincing myself I didn't feel this way about her. That one kiss had just unraveled everything I thought I knew. "I didn't mean to," she started, then stopped, running a hand through her hair. "No, that's a lie. I meant it. I've meant it for a long time." Her words hit like a punch, raw and unfiltered, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. Riley, my Riley, who'd dated half the boys in Willow Creek, who'd always seemed so sure of herself, was looking at me like I held her entire world in my hands. I stood up, needing air, needing space, but the forest offered neither. The drizzle had stopped, but the cold clung to my skin, and the overhang felt smaller now, like it was closing us in with our secrets. "You can't just do that," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "We're best friends, Riley. This isn't we can't." I didn't even know what I was trying to say, only that my heart was racing and the world felt too big and too small all at once. She stood too, stepping closer, her boots crunching on the dirt. "Why not?" she asked, her voice low but fierce. Why can't we? Because of what people back home will say. Because of what you're afraid of. Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Willow Creek wasn't kind to girls like us girls who might want more than friendship, who might love in ways that didn't fit the town's narrow mold. I'm not like you, I said, my voice breaking. I don't just throw myself into things. I don't know how to do this, Riley. I gestured between us, my hands shaking. What if this ruins everything? What if we can't go back? Her face softened, but there was a fire in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Maybe I don't want to go back, she said. Maybe I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this way about you. She took a step closer, and I could smell the cedar on her jacket, could see the way her breath caught, like she was as scared as I was. Nora, I've been in love with you since we were 16. Every time you smiled at me, every time you stayed when everyone else left, I've been falling for you. And I can't keep acting like it's nothing. Her confession hung between us, heavy and fragile, like a glass ornament ready to shatter. I wanted to tell her I felt it too, the pull, the ache, the way my world felt brighter when she was in it. But fear was a vice around my chest, squeezing tight. What would it mean to love her? To let myself want her? Willow Creek would eat us alive, the gossip, the stares, the way my parents' faces would harden if they knew. And yet, standing there, with her so close I could feel the warmth of her. I wanted to be brave. I wanted to be hers. Before I could speak, a rustling in the trees snapped us out of the moment. My heart leapt into my throat, and Riley grabbed my arm, her grip protective. What was that? She whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. The fire was barely embers now, and the forest felt alive, watching us. Another rustle, closer this time, and my pulse spiked. We weren't alone. Stay here, Riley said, her voice firm, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She grabbed the flashlight, its weak beam cutting through the dark as she stepped toward the sound. I wanted to pull her back, to tell her to stop, but my voice was stuck. The rustling grew louder, and Thena low, guttural growl. Not human. Not friendly. Riley. I hissed, grabbing her arm and yanking her back under the overhang. My hands were shaking, but hers were steady as she pulled me close, shielding me with her body. The growl came again, closer, and I caught a glimpse of movement, something big, shadowy, moving through the trees. A bear. A wolf. Whatever it was too close, and we were trapped. We crouched there, hearts pounding, as the thing circled the clearing. Riley's hand found mine, squeezing tight, and in that moment, nothing else mattered, not the kiss, not the fear, not the world waiting back home. Just her, and me, and the promise that we'd get through this together. The growl faded into the night, leaving only the sound of our ragged breathing. Riley's hand was still in mine, her grip anchoring me as the forest settled back into its eerie quiet. We stayed crouched under the overhang, the dying fire casting faint shadows on her face, her eyes wide but resolute. It's gone, she whispered, but neither of us moved, too afraid to trust the silence. My mind was a tangle of fear and something else, something warm and dangerous that her touch ignited. The kiss, her confession, the way she'd shielded me without hesitation, it was all too much. Too fast. I wanted to lean into her, to let the warmth of her body chase away the cold. But the weight of what she'd said kept me frozen. I've been in love with you since we were 16. Those words were a lifeline and a landmine, and I didn't know how to navigate either. We need to stay awake, Riley said, her voice low, practical, like she was trying to pull us back to reality. She let go of my hand, and the absence of her touch felt like a loss. She started piling more sticks onto the fire, coaxing it back to life. I watched her, the way her hands moved with purpose, the way her jaw clenched like she was holding back 1,000 words. I wanted to ask her how long she'd carried this secret, how she'd managed to smile through years of hiding it. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I helped her rebuild the fire, our movements synchronized from years of knowing each other's rhythms. The flames grew, casting a warm glow over the clearing, and for a moment, felt like we could keep the world at bay. But the forest was still out there, vast and unpredictable, and so was the truth between us. Nora, Riley said, sitting back on the log, her voice softer now. I'm sorry if I freaked you out. I couldn't keep it in anymore. She looked at me, her eyes catching the firelight, and I saw the vulnerability she so rarely showed. I don't expect you to feel the same. I just needed you to know. My chest ached, torn between wanting to run from her words and wanting to pull her close. I don't know what I feel, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I've never thought about us like that. Not out loud. It wasn't entirely true. I'd thought about it in fleeting moments, in dreams I'd pushed away by morning. But saying it felt like stepping off a ledge. Riley nodded, like she'd expected that answer, but her shoulders sagged slightly. Okay, she said, forcing a small smile. We don't have to talk about it. Let's just get through the night. But her voice cracked on the last word, and I hated myself for the hurt I saw in her eyes. The night stretched on, cold and endless. We took turns keeping watch, though neither of us slept. Every rustle in the trees made my heart race, and every glance at Riley made it race for a different reason. By the time the sky began to lighten, gray and heavy with clouds, we were both exhausted, our clothes damp from the morning dew. We need to find the trail, I said, my voice hoarse. Riley nodded, already packing up our meager camp. Her movements were brisk, like she was trying to outrun the weight of last night. I wanted to say something, to bridge the gap that had opened between us, but the words felt too big, too fragile. We set out, following the faint path we'd lost the day before. The forest was quieter in the daylight, but it still felt alive, watching us. Riley walked a step ahead, her backpack slung over one shoulder, and I couldn't stop staring at the way her hair caught the light, the way her shoulders carried a strength I'd always leaned on. I wondered what it would be like to let myself love her not just as a friend, but as something more. The thought was thrilling and terrifying, like standing at the edge of a river, knowing it could carry me away. Hours passed, and the trail remained elusive. My legs ached, and my stomach growled, our meager supplies of granola bars long gone. Riley stopped suddenly, pointing to a broken branch on a tree. Look, she said, her voice brightening. That's a marker. We're not totally screwed. Her optimism was infectious, and for a moment, I let myself smile, let myself believe we'd find our way out. But then we heard it again, the growl, low and menacing, closer than before. Riley froze, her hand grabbing mine instinctively. "Don't move," she whispered, her eyes scanning the trees. My pulse thundered in my ears, and I clung to her hand, the warmth of her skin the only thing keeping me grounded. The growl came again, and this time, we saw Ida bear, massive and black, lumbering through the underbrush not 50 feet away. Riley pulled me behind a tree, her body pressed against mine, her breath warm against my ear. "Stay quiet," she murmured, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. The bear sniffed the air, its head swinging toward us, and I thought my heart might stop. But then it turned, disappearing into the trees, and we were alone again, trembling but alive. Riley didn't let go of me, not even when the danger passed. Her forehead rested against mine, and for a moment, we just breathed, the world narrowing to the space between us. "I'm not losing you," she whispered, her voice fierce. "Not to a bear, not to anything." And in that moment, I knew I couldn't keep running from here or from myself. Riley's words hung in the air, fierce and fragile, as we stood pressed against the tree, our breaths mingling in the cold morning air. The bear was gone, but my heart still pounded not just from fear, but from the weight of her promise. "I'm not losing you." I wanted to believe her, wanted to let myself fall into the possibility of us. But the world beyond the forest loomed large, full of judgment and consequences I wasn't sure I was brave enough to face. We pulled apart, but her hand stayed in mine, a quiet anchor as we moved forward, more cautious now. The forest felt differentless, like a refuge and more like a test, pushing us to confront not just the wilderness but the truth between us. Riley's confession had cracked something open in me, and I couldn't shove it back down, no matter how much I wanted to. "We're close," Riley said, pointing to another broken branch, her voice steady but tired. She was trying to keep us focused, to keep us moving, but I could see the strain in her eyes. The weight of last night, of the kiss, of everything unsaid, it was wearing on her as much as it was on me. I wanted to tell her I was sorry, that I was scared, that I didn't know how to be the person she needed me to be. But every time I opened my mouth, the words tangled in my throat. The trail started to reappear, faint but real, and hope flickered in my chest. We followed it, our steps quicker now, driven by the promise of safety. But the forest wasn't done with us. As we rounded a bend, the ground dropped sharply into a ravine, the trail vanishing into a mess of rocks and roots. Riley stopped short, cursing under her breath. "We'll have to climb down," she said, eyeing the steep slope. I looked at the drop, my stomach twisting. It wasn't just the physical danger, it was the metaphor of it all. The way every step forward felt like a leap into the unknown. Riley went first, her movements careful but confident, and I followed, my hands gripping roots and rocks, my heart racing with every slip. She reached back for me, her hand steady, and I took it, letting her guide me down. At the bottom, we paused, catching our breath. The ravine was quieter, the trees thinner, and for the first time, I could hear the faint rush of a river nearby. "That's a good sign," Riley said, her smile breaking through the exhaustion. "Rivers mean civilization, right?" I nodded, wanting to share her hope, but my mind was still caught on her hand in mine, the way it felt like the most natural thing in the world. We followed the sound of the water, the trail growing clearer as the forest opened up. But the closer we got to safety, the heavier the silence between us grew. I knew we couldn't avoid it forever, the kiss. Her confession. The way my heart was pulling me toward her even as my fear pushed me away. I stopped walking, my boots sinking into the damp earth. And Riley turned to me, her expression unreadable. "Nora, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. She stepped closer, and I could see the worry in her eyes, the fear that I was pulling away for good. I wanted to tell her everything, how I'd spent years hiding my feelings, how I was terrified of what loving her would mean, how I didn't know if I was strong enough to face the world as us. But instead, I said, "I don't know how to do this, Riley. I don't know how to be." Her face softened, but there was a flicker of pain in her eyes. "You don't have to know," she said, her voice steady. "You just have to try. I'm not asking for forever, Nora. I'm just asking for now." She reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine, and I felt that spark again, the one that had always been there, waiting. Before I could respond, a shout cut through the air. "Hello? Anyone out there?" It was a man's voice, rough and distant, but unmistakable. Riley's eyes widened, and we both turned toward the sound. Park Ranger, his green uniform stark against the trees, was waving at us from a ridge above the river. Relief flooded through me, but it was tinged with something else, regret. Maybe that our time in the woods was ending, that the world was crashing back in. The ranger helped us up the ridge, his radio crackling as he called in our location. "You two are lucky," he said, handing us water bottles. "People get lost out here and don't make it back." Riley thanked him, her voice bright, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked to me when she thought I wasn't looking. As we followed the ranger toward his truck, the reality of what came next settled over me. We'd survived the forest, the bear, the cold, but the real challenge was waiting back home. Willow Creek, with its small-town gossip and rigid rules, wouldn't make it easy for us to be anything more than friends. And yet, as I glanced at Riley, her face lit by the morning sun, I knew I couldn't go back to pretending. Not anymore. The ranger's truck rumbled along the dirt road, carrying us back to civilization, but the weight of the woods clung to me. Riley sat beside me in the back seat, her shoulder brushing mine, her silence louder than the engine's hum. We were safe, but nothing felt resolved, not the kiss, not her confession, not the question of what we'd be when we stepped back into Willow Creek. The town came into view too soon, its familiar streets and tidy houses a stark contrast to the wild chaos of the forest. The ranger dropped us at my Jeep, still parked at the trailhead, and as he drove off, Riley and I stood there, the air between us thick with everything we hadn't said. "We should get home," I said, my voice flat, but I didn't move. Neither did she. "Nora," she started, her voice low, like she was afraid to break the moment. "What happens now?" Her eyes searched mine, and I saw the fear there, the same fear I felt, the fear of losing what we'd always been to each other. But there was hope, too, a fragile spark that made my chest ache. I thought about Willow Creek, about the way people talked, the way my parents' church friends would whisper if they knew. I thought about the years I'd spent pushing down my feelings for Riley, telling myself it was just friendship, nothing more. But the woods had changed that. Her kiss had changed that. And as scared as I was, couldn't unfeel it. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But I know I don't want to lose you. Not as my friend." not as anything else. It was the closest I'd come to saying it, to admitting that what I felt for her was more than I'd ever let myself believe. Riley's face softened, and she stepped closer, her hand finding mine. "Then don't," she said, her voice fierce and soft all at once. "We don't have to have all the answers now. We just have to keep going. Together." She squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. I let myself feel the warmth of her, the possibility of us, the terrifying, beautiful unknown. We drove back to town in silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was the kind of silence that held space for something new, something we'd figure out together. When we pulled into my driveway, the porch light was on, and I knew my parents would have questions about the trip, about why we looked like we'd been through a war. But for the first time, I didn't care as much. Riley was with me, and that was enough. Over the next few weeks, we navigated Willow Creek carefully. We didn't hold hands in public, didn't give the gossips anything to latch onto, but in private, we let ourselves explore what we could be. Stolen moments in my room, her fingers tracing mine as we watched movies. Quiet walks by the river, where we could talk without fear of being overheard. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was ours. One night, sitting on my bed, Riley looked at me, her eyes soft but serious. "I'm not asking you to be ready for everything," she said. "I just want you to be ready for us." I nodded, my throat tight, and leaned in to kiss her. It was slow, deliberate, a promise that I was trying, that I was choosing her. The woods had tested us, pushed us to the edge of who we thought we were. But they'd also given us a chance to see each other, to see ourselves, in a way we never could have back home. We weren't alone anymore, not in the way we'd been. And as I looked at Riley, her smile bright with possibility, I knew that whatever came next, gossip, judgment, fear, we'd face it together. Our story wasn't over. It was just beginning, carved out in the quiet moments, in the courage it took to cross that line and keep going. The woods had shown us who we could be, and now it was up to us to live one step, one kiss, one day at a time.